So now we've got this Louisville matchup, and these two teams got together, obviously, at Louisville last year, a little bit later in the season, just a couple of weeks. And Notre Dame was coming off that extremely emotional game against Ohio State. And then the Duke game that may have been more difficult than many people anticipated. So two consecutive, just grind it out until the last second type of games, emotional, hard fought games. Then they go to Louisville. It's a close game until the fourth quarter. Jahar Jordan had a remarkable game, and Notre Dame wore down in the second half. What are your thoughts, memories? I'm sure mostly bad of that effort at Louisville last year.
Well, I always get a little nervous playing a Jeff Brohm coach football team because I think Jeff Brohm is one of the smartest football coaches in the country, especially as a play caller. And it was a bye week, and he had a little bit extra time to prepare and all that type of stuff. And it really comes down to it. That game is an example of one of the frustrations of Coach Freeman's tenure has been. I think Marcus Freeman has done a lot of great things in Notre Dame. And, we had a question today in our buy so hold, Marcus Freeman gets a second contract. I'm like, of course he gets a second contract. Like, the question isn't whether or not he's a good coach. He's already established he's a good coach. The question is he a championship coach? That's a very different question. And it's those type of things that make you say right now, no, he's not a championship caliber coach, because you can go on the road and beat Purdue and then by 59, and you can go on the road and beat a solid top 25 A&M team by 10. And then you come home and you get outplayed for 60 minutes by Northern Illinois. Like, why are we getting this kind of roller coaster ride? And the Louisville game was an example of that, because then the next weekend, Mark, they go back home after 3 really tough games and they obliterate USC from start to finish. And then the next week after that, they get a bye. Then the next week after that, they beat Pitt 58-7. And then they sleepwalk through the Clemson game, who was not a very good team and was out 8 starters that game. It's just, you don't know what team's going to show up. And that game was a perfect example. I actually thought the defense battled hard in that game. They kind of, like you said, wore down late. But if you look at Louisville's 3 field goal drives in the fourth quarter, I think the longest drive was like 7 yards. Because Notre Dame went for it on 4th and 13 from their own 30 on one of them. And then, now you're
Right.
down 27. You got to go for it now. You have a turnover. And then Notre Dame scored late to even make it as close as it was. It was 33-13 when Notre Dame scored 2 minutes left. So Louisville completely controlled that action. But if you go back and watch the game, the defense did everything they could to give the offense a chance to get in there. It was 7-7 at halftime. You come out of the break, Cam Hart forces a fumble, you recover in Louisville territory, and you throw a deep ball to Chris Tyree. Wasn't a great ball, but it was catchable, and he drops it. So you come out of the break, and instead of going up 14-7, and now you've got a lot of momentum, crowd's quiet, you drop that ball, they hold them to a field goal. In Louisville's mind, say, that's a win. We held them to a field goal. And then after that, they go down and score, go up 14-10. I think they kicked a field goal to make it 17-10, I believe. And then Notre Dame throws a bomb to Mitchell Evans for a big play, and he gets called back because of illegal hands to the face by Wright. It was just a comedy of errors on the offensive side of the ball that kept them from doing anything. And you kind of knew in the second half at that point in time, they're not going to win this game. Even though it was 17-13 going into the fourth quarter, you didn't really feel like they were actually going to do enough offensively to win. Yeah, I've used this example. What was it? What was Harbaugh's first year? Was it 14 or 15?
15.
14, 15?
15.
I think Ohio State was beating Michigan 13-10 at halftime. And a buddy of mine, were talking before the game. I was like, Ohio State's going to blow them out. He's like, are you still thinking Ohio? And I'm like, yeah, I think they're going to blow them out. Have you watched this game? Yeah, it's 13-10, but it's not that close. It's kind of like the Alabama-Michigan State playoff game in 2015. It was only 7-0 at halftime, but that was not a 7-0 ball game. In the second half, it was more reflected upon how the game was actually playing out. I think the fourth quarter kind of played out more in line with actually how that game was going, because Notre Dame's, third and fourth quarter, Notre Dame's offense could do nothing. They couldn't threaten them. And then when they realized that, Louisville's like, look, we just got to go, get a couple big plays here, and then we're going to put this team away because they're not going to score on our defense. And that's kind of how the game played out.
So here we are minus Sam Hartman and minus Jack Plummer. Insert Tyler Shook, whose head is stays at Oregon and Texas Tech. I did not see the first 2 games. Louisville played against absolutely no one. They beat Georgia Tech by 12. I didn't even see that. I looked at the recap and the box. But what are you gaining from this Louisville team that's the same or different from the 2023 edition?
We were actually having this conversation last night, me and a couple guys on my staff, and we're kind of comparing where Louisville's better and where they're not as good. And defensively, I don't know that they're quite as good as they were last year yet. Part of that is they've got a lot of new players, some transfers, and you know how it is on defense, Mark. It takes a while for Notre Dame to, or for defenses when you've got a lot of transfers to kind of get everybody on the same page. And so I think eventually their defense is going to get going. They're athletic there. They're not quite as good in the secondary. I think they're actually better up front this year than they were last year because of a couple transfers. Offensively, they're not as good at running back as they were last year. Jordan and Garendo were excellent. They're not as good on the offensive line as they were last year, but I think they're better at quarterback. I think Tyler Shough is a much better quarterback than Jack Plummer. The only problem Tyler Shough's had in his career, Mark, is he can't stay healthy. I mean, he's had multiple 300-yard games. I think he had a 400-yard game back a couple years ago against a Power 5 team. He just hasn't been, and he had a couple turnovers against Oregon, but his playmaking was a big reason why Texas Tech almost pulled off that upset of Oregon last year. He's a very talented quarterback. He just can't stay healthy. And what's crazy is this is the second game in a row where Notre Dame is going to play a quarterback that had multiple seasons of starting at quarterback in the same time that Ian Book was a starting quarterback for Notre Dame, if you think about how long ago that was for Notre Dame. But I think he's a seventh-year senior, right? Last year they played a sixth-year senior. And I also think they're a lot more dynamic at receiver. Like Jamari Thrash was a really legitimate weapon last year at receiver, but he was more athletic than he was necessarily a great receiver. I think Ja'Cory Brooks is a dude. I think Chris Bell, who was on the team, I believe, last year, his game is ascending. He's a year more mature. And then you've got to see if they get Colin Lacey back this weekend. So he's been out all year. He's eventually going to be back. If he's not back this week, he'll probably be back next week. You add him into the mix, and I don't know if you're familiar with Colin Lacey, but he was a stud at South Alabama last year, had over 90 catches and I think 12 or 1,300 yards. He's a dude. You're going to ask Oklahoma State how good Colin Lacey is from last season because he was a big driving force in them beating Oklahoma State on the road. So they've got some legit weapons, in my opinion. And I think that's what makes them more dangerous. Even though I don't think they're quite as good in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, they have a much more legitimate thrower at quarterback than Jack Plummer, who's more of just smart, savvy, veteran guy. Tyler Shough is also smart, savvy, veteran guy, but he's got a lot more arm talent. And he's got some very talented weapons to throw to. They're deeper at tight end this year as well. They've got some legit weapons at tight end. So I think this is a dangerous football team. Last year, I thought Louisville was a relatively talented team that won because they've got a wicked smart coach. This year, I think they still have a wicked smart coach, but they have a much more legitimately athletic, talented, long football team with NFL players on it, like a decent amount of NFL players on it. And that's going to make them dangerous. I think they're one of right now 3 teams in the ACC that I look and say that group of 3 is just better than everybody else in the league so far. It's them, Miami, and Clemson. I think right now, I mean, that's no disrespect to Pitt, who's undefeated, and BC's having a great start to the year. But you just watch them play, and you're like, those 3 rosters and those 3 teams look a whole lot different than everybody else in the league from a play standpoint and a roster standpoint. They're legit, and Brohm's just getting started. He's in year 2. It's only going to get better from here for Louisville, in my opinion.
Yeah, he is something else for him to do what he did at Purdue, and now we see them regressing back to what they were before he showed up.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. Go look at Purdue the 3 years before he was there, and now look at what they've been in the year and a half since he's gone. And that'll tell you everything you need to know about what kind of coach Jeff Brohm was at Purdue. I think they won, 9 games in the 4 years before he showed up, right? And he took them to a bowl game in year 1. Like, that guy can coach. Yeah. And now he's getting the athletes that you want. Say, boy, if that guy ever gets the kind of athletes that this school gets and that school gets, watch out. And Louisville, to a degree, can get those kind of those kind of athletes, especially in the portal era. Because now you're going to get in out of high school. If there's not the portal era, they don't get a Ja'Cory Brooks. He's going to Bama, right? But now with the portal era, some of these kids don't pan out or aren't happy with where they are, and now all of a sudden, hey, let's go to Louisville, and I catch 1 million balls at Louisville for a year and get drafted in the NFL. You're going to see that become a regular thing at Louisville with Jeff Brohm there.